Alright, YouTube, so we are back to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake. I've missed talking about this game, it's been a while, but as I mentioned in multiple videos, there's not really been much to talk about regarding this game, but I do want to talk about two things specifically today, one new and one a little bit older, not super old, but kind of old, with the summons. It's kind of an update to the summons, but also not really an update, just kind of a confirmation of something we already know. And then also, we get some information about how they're actually incorporating stuff from the extended universe of Final Fantasy VII, stuff like, Crisis Core, Before Crisis, whatever, into the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I just realized that these two videos we're going to look at were tweeted out exactly a week apart, so I'm wondering if this is going to be like a recurring thing every Friday, dropping these little videos. Similar to how they were dropping like concept art on Twitter every Tuesday for a while there. We had like concept art Tuesdays, if there's going to be these little Friday video things or whatever. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the update to the summons, or again, the confirmation of something that we already know, and it's that you can only use them in certain fights and boss battles. That's it. You can't just run around the world using summons whenever you want to.
特定の強敵、ボスや特定の強敵と、対面したときにある条件を満たすと、召喚マテリアが、召喚マテリアを装備してるんですけど、召喚マテリアが共鳴して、共鳴しだす。
The full video is like a minute long, but we don't need to watch the entire thing, because most of it's stuff we already know. We just needed the confirmation that you can only use summons during boss fights, certain enemy encounters, and when special conditions are met. I'm not entirely sure what he means by the special conditions being met, unless he's just talking about filling up the summon gauge that we've seen in the boss fight with apps. Now, when it comes to being used for boss fights, we already kind of assumed that based on a past quote. These certain powerful enemies, we've actually seen Shiva being used against Eligor, who in the past, when it comes to the original game, Final Fantasy VII, was not a boss, but it was a rare encounter, a rare enemy within the train graveyard itself. But it seems to be a lot of emphasis on Eligor with the remake, because he has his own cutscenes and stuff like that. I made an entire video dedicated to this topic about what we thought was the case based on that quote, and now we have confirmation of. I'm not a fan of this. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I will always speak my mind on this channel. If I don't like something, I will tell you guys. I'm not going to toe the line and pretend like everything about this game is flawless. I've not had really any complaints at all regarding Final Fantasy VII Remake. Outside of the lack of information, I feel like they don't tell us enough about the game. And the summons being limited to boss fights and certain enemy encounters is really my only complaints I've had so far regarding this game. I've liked pretty much everything else. And my main reason for that is just there's no reason for it. To the best of my knowledge, and I'm thinking back to all the Final Fantasy games I've ever played, you could use summons whenever you wanted to. I don't really see the reason why they're being limited to boss fights only and kind of mini-bosses. Some people's arguments or defenses against this is why would you want to use a summon against these little weak enemies anyway? It's just going to absolutely destroy them. And it's well, yeah, that was the case with all the other games too. If you put out a summon against a random enemy encounter, you're more than likely going to kill them in one shot or whatever. That's not a defense. It's not an argument. One of the ones that I've heard people say is that maybe because the world's different now, with it being a kind of open world, 3D, that maybe summons couldn't really walk around with you, but I don't see why that's even a thing. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because you could do it in Final Fantasy XII. You could put out a summon, your entire party disappeared except for the person that summoned the Esper, and it would just follow you around and fight with you. I don't see why that can't be a thing as well with the remake. Yeah, maybe there's some tight corridors where summons couldn't really fit. I get that, I understand that. But this rafter they're walking on right here is wide enough that Ifrit can be summoned on it. Obviously, Ifrit's not going to be here. This is the very first mock reactor. You're not going to have a summon yet. Point is, this area is wide enough for a summon. We've only seen Ifrit and Shiva so far, but Ifrit's not much bigger than Cloud's character model. He's maybe 3 times the size of Cloud, but width-wise, he's not that much thicker than Cloud. He can walk pretty much anywhere that Cloud could in the game for the most part. And let me be clear, just because I'm saying this stuff and talking about this does not mean it's the biggest deal ever. I'm not over here waking up in cold sweats, losing sleep over the fact that I can't use summons whenever I want to. I just like the freedom to be able to. And to me, the summons being limited to the harder fights, like boss fights, makes them feel almost like a crutch material. Why would you not equip them going into a boss fight to make the boss fight easier? Yeah, you could opt to not use the summons to make the boss fight a little bit harder if you want to, but this is the only time you're ever going to be able to see summons within the game is during the boss fight, so why would you not use them? And also, you gotta have materia equipped to level it, and why would you have summons equipped to your character outside of boss fights? Because you can't use them outside of boss fights. It's a wasted materia slot. I don't know. Just none of this really makes sense to me. It's super convoluted. More than it needs to be. Anyways, moving on. The next clip we're going to look at is Yoshinori Kitase telling us how they actually incorporated lore from the extended universe of Final Fantasy VII, Before Crisis, to give Avalanche a better backstory, which is pretty big information. We're going to play the full clip. It's about 30-something seconds. You're going to have to read it, obviously, because there's subtitles.
そうですね、ファイナルファンタジーの原作以降あったコンピレーションの中で続編があるんですけども、クラシックファイナルファンタジー7でウータイ戦争っていう、設定が描かれてたので、今回、7リメイクにあたってアバランチの、組織の設定をより、リアリティを持たせるために後の作品のコンピレーションで、出てきた設定をうまくまたリメイクの方に、取り入れて深みを増している、 一例となります。
So what he's talking about there is within Crisis Core, we actually get to see the war with Wutai, which is something we hear about in the original Final Fantasy VII. He talks about how they're taking things from the extended universe of Final Fantasy VII with the compilation of Final Fantasy VII and giving a better backstory to Avalanche. This could potentially be alluding to stuff from Before Crisis, which was the cell phone only game in Japan, where we get to follow like the Turks and stuff like that, but also has characters from Final Fantasy VII. And actually, looking at this image right here that I got off of Google, there actually is like pretty much everybody from Final Fantasy VII, like pretty much the entire cast. So Before Crisis has some sort of backstory for pretty much every single character that you've seen within the original Final Fantasy VII. And what's interesting about Before Crisis, in case you don't know much about it, is that you actually get to see the early iteration of Avalanche before it was just Tifa, Barrett, Cloud, and Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge. You actually get to see like other characters like Elfie, I think is how you say her name, who's actually a pretty strong character. And if I remember correctly, within the story of Before Crisis, she actually like fights Sephiroth and kind of stands toe to toe with him, and she's like the original leader of Avalanche, which I think is pretty interesting. There's a lot of backstory to Avalanche that you don't know about unless you branch off into the extended universe, and I think they're going to incorporate stuff like that into the remake based on Yoshinori Kitase's quote here. I absolutely would love to see them expand on the history of Avalanche for those that don't know it and maybe add some new stuff to it or whatever the case. I'd also like to see like Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge, since we know they're expanding on their characters within the remake. How exactly did they join Avalanche? I don't know if that's ever been a thing. I've never looked into that. And another kind of small quick one is with Before Crisis, you actually get to see how Red 13 gets that scar across his eye, which we don't know about with the original game, right? The original game, it's never known like how exactly did he get that scar. Well, they tell you that in Before Crisis. That's something small that they might incorporate into the remake. The reason why this statement from Yoshinori Kitase is so important is because there's an interview going back as far as almost 3 years ago with Tetsuya Nomura in Silicon Era, where he talks about how the extended universe of Final Fantasy VII might not have an overall coherence with the remake itself, which led many to believe, including myself, that they were retconning the other games. And obviously, over the years, I've learned that that's not the case. Doesn't make a lot of sense, and this is just confirmation of that from Yoshinori Kitase, that they are taking lore from the other games and adding a better backstory to Avalanche, and probably the game as a whole. Which means that you could see stuff incorporated from Before Crisis and Crisis Core, so any of the characters that were involved in those games added into the remake, which I think is fantastic. Anyways, my dudes, that's pretty much the video. We probably could have done 2 separate videos with this. We probably could have talked about the summon thing separately, and then this adding lore from the other games in a separate video as well. But we've been doing a lot of Bethesda, Fallout-related stuff over the past week or 2 or whatever, so I kind of missed making a video about the summon thing. I didn't even know if I wanted to make a video about it actually, and just decided to throw it into this video. Anyways, as usual, I'll pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts on summons being limited to certain fights and boss battles only, and what are your thoughts about them incorporating lore from the other games within the Final Fantasy VII compilation? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new and want to stay up to date with more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on my notifications. Follow me on Twitter at TheDashingDavid. And my Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Give me a smile, give me forever for a while, give me forever for a while. Quit